Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where writers just talk about shit about writing. It's pretty straightforward, pretty self-evident. Before I get to today's guest, just a quick note that Unbound Writer, my company that does coaching and retreats and online classes, we are going to be offering a 2 to 3 day writing retreat in beautiful Paris, France, next October. It's going to be myself and the thriller writer Alex Finlay, and we're going to grab a couple other high-profile authors to join us. So it's going to be amazing. Details coming out hopefully soon. And also there is a new online class at Unbound Writer. It is a recording of the Dark Art of Writing Thrillers, a workshop that I conducted online. So now you can also purchase that. All right. So today I had the amazing Alma Katsu on the program. Might be Katsu. I'm going to say Katsu. Alma, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly. She is the New York Times bestselling author who's been nominated and won multiple prestigious awards, including the Stoker Award, Goodreads Readers Choice, International Thriller Writers, Locus Magazine, and the Western Heritage Awards. So she's highly accomplished. She's got a really interesting story because she worked in the intelligence community, CIA and NSA for, I believe, 30 plus years, and still does some consulting with them, got out of it about a year and a half or so ago. But her heart, or at least early on, and her early studies were all centered around writing. And essentially, writing always finds a way to come out of you if you were destined for that to happen. And in her case, it came in the form of an illness when she was 40 that kind of sidelined her from work. And she started to write and found the comfort and the joy in that. And her first novel was published in 2011. And since then, she's had multiple novels published, and she's really kind of vacillated between starting out with almost like supernatural romance to horror to spy thrillers and kind of back to horror. So she's doing a lot of everything, and her works have been optioned for TV and film. One that we discussed is very close to being in production, so fingers crossed on that. But it was fascinating to hear about her writing career and her career in the intelligence community and what she studied and how that informed her writing and what she was allowed to write and what she wasn't allowed to write within the parameters of her employment agreement. So super fascinating conversation. You're going to love this one. This is my talk with Alma Katsu. So you're in the mountains of West Virginia, according to your website.
We are. It happened during COVID. We just happened to be building a tiny little vacation cabin. And so with COVID, we'd said, well, why don't we just try it full time? And we really enjoyed it. So we actually moved to a second home that's bigger in the same neighborhood. I know. It's crazy.
And I'm asking because I've gone through a similar thought process with my partner. We start, I'm in Colorado, and we're starting to look a little bit more long-term about, do we want to be around fewer people? That kind of a whole situation. Was it this thought of like, well, I can kind of write from anywhere. I can consult from anywhere. We can be, I don't know how remote you are, but we could be as remote as we wanted to be, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of consideration. So we're about between 2 and 3 hours from DC.
Okay.
And,
which is where you were before.
Which is where we were before. And we just happened to luck out, and we found this neighborhood, which is about 250 houses, and they're mostly second homes.
Yeah.
And they're all owned by Washingtonians who come out for the weekend.
Got
so, on the weekends, we were surrounded by very, not what you think of when you think of West Virginia. I'll just put it that way.
Right.
And After COVID, the number of full-timers really grew. So
Interesting.
even during the week, there's friends here and that sort
Yeah.
of thing. It's just a super social neighborhood, like uncommonly social. So, but there's downsides to it, like the nearest real emergency room is an hour away.
Oh, wow.
Uh, the nearest grocery store is 30 minutes away if you drive fast.
Yeah.
So, you sacrifice, it's a food desert here. There's almost no restaurants,
Wow.
except on the weekend, there's a couple. So, you give up some things, but for a writer, it's great. And if you're not particularly, you don't want to be around people like me, it's perfect.
I know it's funny. I go through those phases and I always think, it would be great to be around fewer people, but yet I think on some level I crave at least some kind of human energy. I write in a coffee shop every day. Like
Oh,
that's where I go to write. I don't talk to anyone except for the baristas who now I'm all best friends with. But there's something about I think there's something about human bodies somewhere in peripheral vision that is comforting, even though on a very conscious level I hate everybody. So I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things where you go remote and you're like, all right, I'm very quickly lonely. So I don't know what the right solution is,
it,
but
it
it's not.
is tough. Yeah, it is
Uh,
tough.
and now you obviously didn't start out as a writer, and we'll kind of go through that progression. But was that for lack of a better term, the need for storytelling, something that existed that you can go look back and be like, oh geez, as a 7-year-old I was performing plays and that I made up in front of my family.
Well, yeah, I mean a lot like of that. When I was young, books, I was a heavy reader
Yeah.
and I grew up in a small town, although there was a lot of people around. But, I was one of those introverted kids, so I spent all my time in the library and I think I just assumed I would be a novelist one day.
Huh.
But, when I was young, no pre-internet, and it wasn't very apparent how one became a novelist.
To even
So
have that thought that you would become one is pretty forward thinking for a kid.
I just wanted to, write stories, right? Tell
Yeah.
stories. And I think most of us probably get the bug, you know, a little early now, whether or not we're able to, follow up on it. But, my parents were very aware of the need to have a livelihood. So they really didn't want me to become a writer. My degrees are in writing,
Oh
and I
wow.
was a part-time journalist at the time, but
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to go into intelligence. And so I did it more just to get away from Boston, actually.
So how does, just to interrupt real quickly, like, because I remember, I went to college, and I remember, for example, the intelligence community would come to campus to recruit, and you could be kind of anyone. You didn't have to be like a poli sci major or anything like that. I mean, how did you find that field?
So it makes people very upset when I tell them, but I'm old. So when I was young, and also the fact that I went to NSA, the National Security
Yeah.
Agency first, and that's an extremely technical agency, and they sort of have different needs than some of the other agencies.
Hmm.
And so back then, they just tested you for aptitude. If you had the aptitude to do the kind of work that they needed, they would offer you a job. So I had a lot of friends, for instance, they were artists and they ended up becoming, cryptographers
Yeah.
or um, uh, musicians who ended up becoming
Yeah.
mathematicians, things like that.
I mean, I
So
think that stands to reason. Nowadays you would expect people who are high level coders or whatever, but the idea that you have this intellectual curiosity that's willing to kind of think outside certain parameters probably fits the bill more than somebody who's just technically proficient.
I'd like to think so. That's very kind of you to say. But things have changed a lot. One of
Yeah.
the later things I did at CIA was I was sent out for a year to be a recruiter. I was a recruiter for the
Hmm.
analytic career field, and I saw how much things had changed. I mean, kids these days, they start grooming themselves like at 3 years old. to one day be the ideal candidate for CIA.
Oh,
They
wow.
have three languages and they did all this overseas travel and it's just insane the way they
Right.
prep themselves. So a lot of the old
Huh.
timers, we say we never, never would have been hired if we had to apply today.
And do you think that's for the best that you have? Because I assume there's also can be a disconnect between the idea of what it's like to be an analyst in the CIA and what it actually is. And um, but do you think it's for the best that you do have kind of these more impassioned kids who are just singularly focused on that kind of field?
That's a great question. It's a little hard to know. I mean, I was very impressed with the younger colleagues that came
Yeah.
in, and we found some great talents out there. But one thing I'll say is, so the last third of my career, I went back to technology, working technology. I kind of started in my earliest days at NSA that way, and I got involved in with emerging technologies, and I ended up becoming uh, for working in foresight, a technology forecaster.
Okay.
And so,
Interesting.
yeah, and part of that was based on I did work in two emerging technologies as an analyst, as part of the teams that we were trying to figure out. In one case, the technology was something that was just coming. It's a huge, widespread technology at the time. We knew it was coming and it would be transformative to our work. The second one was social media, and
Hmm.
we didn't know if it would be transformative or not, but we had to figure out how do you find if whether or not it can answer intelligence questions. Now, this
Yeah.
was in mid knots when social
Yeah.
media was starting. So, one of the things I learned from that is a lot of times with new technologies, there's nobody there that knows. I mean, data scientists were even pretty thin on the ground at that
Yeah.
time.
Right.
So you
Sure.
don't have the people with the technical skills, and it takes something else. Like a lot of us who started, not just doing this kind of work, not just at the agency, but I mean in the field too. The researchers that I worked with, they didn't have training in it. So yeah, sometimes I worry that maybe we're not getting that the intelligence community is not getting the people necessarily with the free thinking or the imagination that's needed to be able to help us with unanticipated issues or obstacles.
Right.
Because also those people generally aren't treated very well
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
any organization that has very clear lines, right? Like I don't feel like I was treated as well as I could have been treated
Yeah.
when I was there because I
Well,
was willing to do this work that was not well rewarded because it interested me.
right. That's the idea of like, you get to be what you've always wanted to become, and that's the reward, not the pay, not the attitude. And now it's got to be a complete shit show, right? Because like you don't know if you have job security, you don't,
Oh, those poor
and
people, yeah.
yeah,
It's
and
so
talk
daunting.
about dealing with emerging technology with AI and everything else. Like it's so much more complex, I would think, than it was even then. And to have the right people to be able to kind of understand the impact of all that, and with with no job security, has got to be, yeah. You're
Yeah.
probably glad you're not a part of it anymore,
Oh, very much so. Even after I retired, they hired me back to be a consultant in this field.
which is
And I
great because you can say yes or no.
sort of, I still spent a lot of time trying to convince them to do things. But so I only got out of it about a year and a half ago.
Oh
But a
wow,
lot of
okay.
the people that I know that I worked with have retired. And so from the few people I know who have friends still in it or whose paths I cross who are still working, yeah, it's incredibly demoralizing. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And I think about kind of this path that you took, and particularly the role that you, at least for some time, focused on in terms of emerging technologies. And I know that informs some of your writing. But to me, writing is problem solving. It's structurally what are the answers that explain everything that I've set up in this. And it just, knowing you in the 20 minutes that I've known you, it seems like your brain probably loves that. Loves like that whole idea of attacking the plot with how implausible can I make it? And then yet answer with plausible and perhaps very scary answers.
Well, I don't think I'm as as creative maybe as you, because one thing I have to say is I'm just really figuring out what a big impediment this is to me now. I worry too much about what other people will think of the writing, right? So
Sure.
like one thing with the spy novels for this has been since the beginning, is that I part of me worried what my former colleagues would think,
Sure.
because one of the jobs I was at the most was sort of at CIA's think tank. And
Hmm.
right on the other side of the wall were the retirees who wrote all the reviews for the think tank of any books that had anything to do with spycraft. So nonfiction, but also fiction. And they loved to rip the fiction books apart, right? And how unrealistic they were and all that kind of stuff.
So the
And it's
fear was more about the realism as opposed to maybe the quality of writing.
absolutely. And the
Yeah.
thing is, I knew that in the general public, they didn't care that much about the realism. They always say they do,
Right.
but the reality of it is so much slower and
Right.
so much less fun, right? So what I found over the years was, it's a balance, trying to balance it. But to this day, it's still like my knee-jerk reaction is to try to go for realism. Also because it's
Sure.
like the analyst credo, right? We
Yeah.
tell the truth to power. So I always feel funny when I make it too wild or crazy. And that's probably why none of my books are too wild or crazy. And listening to you, I think I really have to work on that.
Well, it's funny. We're very similar, not obviously in our background, but in terms of our writing. I get so fixated on realism. I don't mind a slightly preposterous plot as long as the players have realistic actions and consequences within the parameters of that plot. And what happens a lot of times is it does make it is slower. It makes your heroes quote unquote weaker because they fail a lot because that's just what happens.
What happened?
And 10 books later, I still struggle against that. I still get
Hmm.
editorial notes like, can we amp up the action here? Can we, because, to me, if your hero gets shot in the knee, they're not running away. There's real consequences to that. Somebody even getting hit in the face, it's a major trauma.
Yeah.
And but I also think you must also run into, as a former employee, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a responsibility to give them a first look so that they can say no to certain elements. And that's got to be contrary to this strive for realism, right? They're like, well, this is too real.
But it's a good excuse, I'll tell you that. I
Yeah.
mean, there are things that I could have put in, but they're classified, right? I mean, the things they want to protect are sources and methods. They don't want you to give away any secrets, whether that's a fact that you know of or whether it's a way that they get the information
Right.
or, the methods
Right.
part. And so you know instinctively that you have to protect that. I mean, I had 35 years as a federal officer, before I became a consultant. And that's just drummed in your head. So I don't think I could tell a secret,
Yeah.
you know, if
Even
it,
if you
whatever,
tried, right?
yeah, even if I tried. So if that will force me to try to come up with a creative way around having to do that sort of thing. It also gets me emails and stuff sometimes or text messages from former intelligence people saying, well, that's not right. And I
Yeah.
have to say, well, think about why I wrote what I wrote. And then they're like, oh, I get it. You
Right.
know,
And you still want to make it, the intelligence community at large is not responsible for the lion's share of copies of your books being sold. You are still writing for an audience who just appreciates, in this case, spy thrillers. And that's like with everything, is like, is this going to be believable to 70% of my readers?
right.
It's not going to be believable to everyone, and that's okay. And you have to let that go. And some authors really struggle with letting that go. They get so involved in the research that then the book becomes a great piece of education, but not so interesting because it's just so research based, and they're so concerned about it being real.
Right. Well, you had asked about the pre-publication review process, and I'll just touch on that quickly. Yes, everyone who's worked at an agency and had a top secret clearance, is under a continuing obligation to give the agency that you worked at, or mostly you worked at. If you're like me and you worked for several, there's like
Yeah.
this whole process of deciding who gets the oversight. But you have to give them a chance. And for me, I've been super lucky. They've been very good. Of course, I try really hard, like I said, not to put any secrets in it. And maybe I police myself too stringently.
Right.
Maybe I can get closer to the line, but I'd rather stay on their good side.
Right, right. Because you want to not only maintain friendships, but you want, hey, I might write another spy thriller where I would like some questions answered about how it's being done currently.
You never know. So all of my spy stories, because in addition to the novels, I've written some for Amazon Original Stories. They've all been optioned by Hollywood, and one of them is in production right now. And you never know when you need to go back and ask the
Right.
agency for a favor.
Totally.
So, yeah,
Yeah, and we all know that the time between an option and any potential production um, could be 10 years. I mean, it's
exactly.
usually never,
Yeah, it's usually
but
never.
it could be 10 years.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about anything that has to do with intelligence or technology, that changes every month.
Oh yeah. I mean, the emerging technologies, whether it's in the field of analysis of it or
Yeah.
everyday life, you never know. So for instance, my next horror novel is actually technology based. And it's not just generative AI that figures into the technologies that are in the story. And I wrote to my editor I had handed in the manuscript and she was doing her first review. And I said, okay, well, this development with Sora, which is a multimodal generative AI system, kind of changes the playing field, but I think there's an easy way around it. But, this is what we used to call virtual reality.
Right.
And that has been around for a long time with no progress in sight, no progress. And we all thought it was mostly just the user interface, like the
Right. The
Oculus.
goggles. Right.
Who would have thought that, this would all come out of natural language processing instead? So, it hits us in real life as analysts looking at it. That's why prediction is so hard to say, is this technology going to become disruptive? And if so, when? Because
Yeah.
it's always this unexpected confluence of elements and events. A lot of them are societal, not necessarily dependent on the technology itself.
Huh.
Society has to be ready for a technology. And then it usually gets applied in ways that you don't anticipate, which we're
Right.
certainly seeing with generative AI.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's almost not a good thing to try to write about a new technology that's moving quickly because the 18 months or so that it takes for the book to get on the shelves,
Right.
God only knows what's going to happen, right?
Right.
With the
Right. And
technology
it
and yeah.
might be 18 months after you've written it. That might
Yeah.
not even include the writing time, depending on what you're doing. So you mentioned horror, and I know you play in both fields, right? And it's a very watery definition, I think, between suspense, thriller, and horror, however you want to classify those things. So I write really dark thrillers, very singular in terms of small cast, one person's point of view, and but they're not considered horror, but they've been called horror adjacent. I don't know what that means. So as somebody who I think started out kind of in that spy thriller, action packed kind of a venue and technology, and then moving to horror, was this a thought process, or was it like I just wrote something darker and the publisher called it horror?
So it's even worse than that. I actually started out a long time ago. My first novel came out in 2011, and that was The Taker. And that was considered more, what was popular at the time, which I guess a lot of people would call paranormal romance.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like those. It was extremely dark, and it was not YA, except in Brazil for some reason. But the rest
Those
of the
Brazilians
world,
can handle their stuff.
oh my God, and they went crazy for it. But So it wasn't horror, but like you said, kind of horror adjacent because it had supernatural things going on, but it wasn't what most people, the horror writers in the horror community hated paranormal romance and really
Yeah.
kept it back. So after that, though, I got the opportunity to, I had this historical and it had the supernatural element, but at the time, the publisher, all of us involved with the production of it, none of us said this is The Hunger, that this is a horror novel. It wasn't until it came out that it was really embraced by the horror community. And you know how publishers are. So they're like, you're a horror writer now.
Let's lean into
So
that. Yeah.
yeah. And so I wrote a couple of those. And then I retired from CIA, and my editor at the time said, I know you've always wanted to write a spy novel. Why don't you give it a go?
Huh.
And because she knew very specifically, I wanted to write a female-centric one
Yeah.
to really show what it's like for women professionals in the field today, right?
Yeah.
So I got that opportunity. So, and then we bounced back and forth. And I'm telling you, that is no way to have a writing career. Do not do this. Do not do this, people watching.
Well, it's interesting from the agent's perspective that your agent encouraged you, because from my perspective, what I see just personally is this is your lane and these are what your readers are expecting from you. And I've deviated from that lane like very slightly. And even that is like, okay, this one's maybe a little bit less propulsive. It's more coming of age, but it's still a dark thriller. Nope. They'll still publish it, but it won't be embraced. So you're going, you're still within kind of adult suspense, playing field, I guess. But
Yeah.
that's pretty
No, it's
different
insane.
stuff.
Yeah, it's insane. The two audiences, it makes sense. There's only like a handful of people who read all my books. It makes sense. If you like horror, chances are you're not going to like geopolitical thriller, right?
Right.
And
Right.
vice versa. So, I blame no one, just my own stupid self. I think when the opportunity came up, we thought, spy thrillers were pretty popular. And the idea was like, well, you have this platform, let's give it a go and see how it goes. And Red Widow was fairly successful. Um, Red London was the second of the series, and you know how that is. They never
Right.
put enough push behind your second book.
Yeah.
It still, it was critically successful, but it
Right.
was less commercially successful. And then Putnam said, let's put a pause on the spy novel. But Amazon was interested, and they've been doing my original stories, and we're actually moving my spy books over to Amazon. So they're going to be publishing the next spy novel. Again, is it a good idea that I write in both, continue to write in both? No, I think it's a crap idea.
Well,
But Hollywood really loves the spy stories. I
yeah.
mean, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think for writers listening, that's important to know that, a lot of writers obviously have huge imaginations and want to dabble in a lot of different genres. I think the business side of it is that in your case, it sounds like Putnam was publishing both, I assume different editors.
No, same editor.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
that's rare. From my observation, that's pretty rare. And that's great because it makes it a lot easier. But as you said, there's, the Venn diagram of those two audiences overlaps very little. And so if you put out a spy thriller, that audience doesn't want to wait 4 years for your next one. So you have to almost be on the same schedule, which means now you're writing twice as many books in the same amount of time that somebody staying within the parameters of one genre would be producing the same amount. It's exhausting. I can imagine it's got to be exhausting.
I'm exhausted. Yeah. Yeah, it's tiring, but you're absolutely right. I think most writers would like to write more than one genre.
Yeah.
It's just they've been warned by their agents and maybe even their editors that that's not a good idea. And I think in retrospect, my literary agent would have stopped me if he could have.
Yeah.
But we are where we're at. But I mean, honestly, I do get people who are aspiring to be published who come out of the woodwork and tell me, oh, well, my first book's this, but I think my second book's going to be, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. If you're
Well, I
serious
think when
about
you're
career,
starting out, you still are figuring out who you are as a writer. Because one of the considerations is, yeah, you could do both, maybe under different names.
Right.
The idea that you're going to have this, because so for example, like I have a YA thriller, dark thriller, psychological thriller, but it's YA and it's co-written, and we're shopping it right now because my editor doesn't do YA, and and you get back in that path of like, oh yeah, rejections. I remember those. You're starting out all over again. So you have to be kind of prepared for that. But I think early on, I mean, I think it takes 5 or 6 books, whether they're published or not, to figure out what you're doing, who you are, what you enjoy, what you're good at, where's your voice. It took me a lot of books to to figure that out. And if you're being published throughout the process, sometimes you do need to stick in that one lane. Do you have one that I mean, I know your most recent book just launched in September, right?
Yeah,
And,
Fiend.
yeah, The Fiend, and obviously horror, I'm guessing. Is that, do you just like being in that world?
Well, again, it's partly publishing business.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm better known as a horror writer,
yeah,
believe it or not. That all may change if we get the TV series, if we get the green light on
yeah.
Black Vault, which is a spy novel, but it's kind of like the X-Files. So
Okay,
it
so there's some
does straddle a
paranormal.
little bit.
Yeah,
There's some UFO shit going on, and I've
yeah.
tried to talk the producers into keeping the monster of the week thing going, but I don't know if it's
If
gonna
you
make
squint
it.
really hard, you can see my Scully and Mulder figurines on my bookshelf, and my
Oh,
dog's name is Scully.
oh, that's wonderful.
So you're speaking to my heart.
Okay, well, keep your fingers crossed. We're AMC has it,
That's great.
and the producers of Breaking Bad and The
Oh,
Walking Dead are behind it.
oh, Jesus.
So it's looking really good, but we're just waiting for that green light. And the showrunner they got is excellent.
Yeah,
But we haven't talked enough about whether or not we're going to go the Monster of the Day route. He's just starting to figure out the first season
yeah.
right
That's
now.
that's amazing though. That's a lot of progress, because normally it's you get a showrunner attached and then there's a strike or everyone's on
Yeah,
vacation or whatever it is. Like, I don't even ask. I've got a couple things optioned, and my film and TV agents will check in with me from time to time, give me updates, but otherwise I don't even think about it because I'm like, chances are nothing's going to, and it could be anything that derails
right.
it. A change of leadership at the production company, whatever.
That's happened. All those things. You're such a realist. That's so good. I mean, and people need to know that. So, because I'm sure you experience this too. A lot of times your readers, or at least casual readers, I'll say, are more interested in what's going on in Hollywood
Totally,
than in books per se.
totally.
And, it's just for us, it's just a sad fact of life. And most people don't understand that just getting that option it's still, 99% it's not going to happen. So,
Totally. And then you get the question in interviews that I hate is like, well, who would you see in the role of so and so? I'm like, I don't know. I don't, and I feel like it's bad luck even talking about it.
yeah, it's
So,
true.
and it's just like, my brain doesn't think that way. I'd rather just, by the time, if and when this thing ever actually turns into something, it's going to be some actor I've never even heard of before anyway.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I feel like I'm from a whole other generation and I don't know the youngest actors, the
I
up and
don't
coming.
either. I
But
don't
do you
either.
know May Cobb? Do you know May Cobb, the
Yeah,
writer?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Right. But
That's
it's the
the odds are
huge
so,
exception.
yeah. But it's so nice to see it happen to a nice person. To see it happen for anyone, really, but to know it's a nice person is really a lot. So to see it happen once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, um, I feel like we got sidetracked a little bit.
Well, we were just kind of talking a little bit about, you're writing horror. That's part, you love to write horror, but
Oh,
also
yes.
it's market driven. But I'm also curious, you started writing horror. You're in the intelligence community at the time. You have this lifelong kind of vision of being a writer. You have a little bit of a journalistic background, so it's always been in your DNA. And the first thing is the first thing that you wrote is that what sold that horror novel?
Well, I mean, it was not horror per se. It was a supernatural, like big epic romance, right? That had this magical element to it. So,
Oh, okay. Right, right,
I
right,
mean, I
right.
don't know if it falls more in like the fantasy camp.
Yeah.
Uh, it was, all, I mean, really a lot of different camps sort of embraced
Oh,
it.
okay.
I was a
Got it.
lot younger. The idea for that book actually came out of a short story I'd written when I was in my early 20s.
Oh, okay.
Once I went into intelligence, I pretty soon had to stop all outside writing. I was just starting to place short stories. I was writing on the Washington music scene for 3 magazines. I had to stop all of that. And I thought at the time,
Just
well,
because of a lack of time, or
no,
it was
at
they're
that
like,
time,
you can't do any of this kind of stuff.
right. Now, that's rolled back. It's the whole thing is very politicized,
Yeah.
honestly. And
Yeah.
um, but at the time I thought, I've made this commitment. Um, yeah, I'm just starting out in this new career. I want to see if I can do
Totally.
it
Yeah.
well. So I said, okay, I'm going to put the writing aside. And I didn't come back to it for 20 years. So when I was 40, I got really sick with a
Hmm.
neurological issue, and we weren't
Hmm.
sure I was going to be able to return to work. And so during that time, just to sort of have something to do, because I had complete vertigo. I could not watch TV. I couldn't use a computer. I
Oh,
couldn't
wow. Yeah,
walk
that's
even.
debilitating. Yeah.
Yeah. I was writing stories again in longhand, and it was such a comfort
Huh.
that I told myself if I get better, maybe I'll go back to writing fiction. And that's what happened. So it was a story, it came out of a story I wrote in my
Wow.
20s. And the interest that yeah, well, just you wait. Apparently, illness hits people at 40, like that's very common, but I'm more around the 40s, very common. Um, so that was the kind of thing I loved then.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the kind of thing I read now. Of course, now I write more into horror, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to that whole sort of fantasy
Yeah.
kind of
Right.
thing. Unfortunately, because boy, romanticy's doing pretty well.
I know, but now it's also flooded, like anything is.
Okay.
It goes through these phases, and that's why you never want to write to the market, because you write from the heart and hope that it hits the right place. And I think
Yeah.
there are market. I'm not saying that you have zero market considerations, but if you try to time the market, it's almost impossible.
Right.
So,
I'm just like kicking myself because when I got into it with the taker, the market was dying. And
yeah,
now that sort of audience is coming back. But I can't complain. Horror is very hot right now. There's a lot of new readers for horror. It's really growing. A lot more stores are putting in horror sections. Completely horror themed bookstores are opening up across the country
yeah,
of events. So it's a good time to be in horror. Personally, I find horror is harder to write. Spy novels, that was my life for
yeah. Right,
35 years.
right. You can
Um,
tap into that better than you can
I don't even have to
blood
think
and
about
gore.
it. Like, but horror, especially because I'm kind of picky. I really hate cliche.
Yeah,
I have no interest in writing the same book over and over again. So all
right,
my books tend to be a little different too
right.
from each other, which makes it hard to build an audience.
Yeah, and it frustrates. I'm the exact same way. All mine are standalone novels,
Oh,
and you're
okay.
just like, oh, this is what, and I don't outline. So I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but it's kind of fun to figure this out, even if it's a hot mess in the process. And I think horror is interesting too because so I just read Darcy Coates because I just did a thing with her because she's with my same press, and it was like, I mean, it was dark and exceptionally graphic. And it was,
And was the latest book? Do you remember that?
yes, it was the latest one about the influencer kind of retreat. How Bad Things Can Get is the name
Oh,
of
yeah.
it.
I heard it's a little different for her from her normal writing. I've heard.
I don't know.
But
I haven't read any more of her. She's the sweetest person I've ever met. she, I mean, most thriller and horror writers are just wonderful people.
they are.
But
They
I
are.
think you can also get into horror from a very psychological perspective, where it's mind trapped kind of horror, and it's not so graphic. I'm a big believer in when violence occurs, it should be exceptionally meaningful. Same with sex. That maybe used sparingly, but when it happens, it's real, it's visceral, it's consequential, and it's psychological. And I love that. I don't know if that's considered horror or not, or if it's just psychological suspense at that point.
Well, you had mentioned it earlier, right? Definition is very hard. And we talk about this all the time in horror, especially in the time that I've been in. So The Hunger came out in 2018, and that's when the horror movement was just starting to grow. And I say this all the time, it's gotten to be a big tent. If people aren't into horror, they tend to think of it as in just like this one particular way, like splatterpunk or
Yeah,
Saw movies or something
right,
like that. People wielding chainsaws, with skin masks on. And it can be that,
right,
but horror now is so much more than that.
right.
And I think there's a lot of overlap with other genres and subgenres, especially psychological suspense, et cetera, et cetera. If you go to the Horror Writers Association, their definition is that horror is not a genre, it's a feeling.
Yeah,
It's any story that makes you feel dread and terror, that scares you.
right.
Well, a lot of psychological
Right.
suspense.
Mine totally do that. But maybe not pervasively every page of the book. But that's the overall feeling of the book is turn the page, but you with half closed eyes squinting at the words.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of Stephen King, every page isn't scary. You
I
know what
would
I mean?
argue Stephen King, most of his stuff in the last 20 years, with the exception of some of his short stories, isn't quite horror. You look at like 11/22/63,
Right. That
um,
was
or Billy Summers. Like Billy Summers is one of my favorite books of his, and it's a straight up thriller, and I loved it. But everyone thinks of him as
scary.
the Carrie, The Shining, Salem's Lot, his early stuff, which Misery, which was even Misery, I would say, is almost a thriller rather than horror.
Right.
But who knows? But
Yeah.
you get labeled, so you can get labeled, and this is Alma's a horror writer, and they have this expectation that you still might be under that umbrella, but you did something different, and they're like, oh, there's not enough violence in this for me.
Right. I mean, you know how it is. You're going to get responses from readers across the board, no matter what you do. It was
Right,
too scary. It wasn't scary enough. It's a slow burn. Oh, it's too fast. It's hard to
right.
hard to make every
That's where
reader.
you lean on your editor, you lean on your agent, and just like, as long as it's good enough for you, it's their job to place it properly.
Ah, yes, we can say that till the cows come home,
Yeah.
can't we? I write them, you sell them.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's amazing to me how mature this business is and how ultimately everyone's just guessing.
Yes, absolutely.
There's data science in the publishing world, and Source Books, who I'm with, is a fierce proponent of it, and I have a huge heart for that. But nobody knows. No, at the end of the day, nobody knows what's going to hit, what's not going to hit, what's going to resonate, and it could be the cover. That's the thing that got it. At least people to pick it up.
Yeah, or just something that happened in the news that day.
Right.
Sometimes that'll make people want to read more. Sometimes it drives them away. Like, I was breaking in when there was still U.S. boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Said, well, I mean, I was involved with the Iraq war planning in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. I said, boy, could I write you an Iraq novel? And they were like, no, actually, the novels have not been selling. The
Yeah.
nonfiction had sold. So you just,
People are saturated.
yeah,
It's like, why would I want to like read the news?
right,
I've been reading the news all day long, and it's depressing me. I'm the
yeah,
same way. I read historical nonfiction mostly.
yeah, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
That's
interesting.
true.
Well, Alma, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our own little storytelling. This is the
Okay.
making it up portion of the show. I have 3 books that I chose at random off my bookshelves. We're going to choose one book. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that will be the first sentence in like a 2-minute long short story. So I'll read the sentence. You give me a sentence or two. I'll do a sentence or two. And when it goes off the rails, I will put a bullet in its head. Um, I've got Dean Koontz's Odd Thomas,
Okay.
Donna Tartt's The Little Friend.
Oh, I love The Little Friend.
I know, me too. And Carlene O'Connor's You Have Gone Too Far. So choose one of those.
Oh, I really want to do The Little Friend, but maybe I should do one that I'm not familiar with. So how about the last one?
Sure, You've Gone Too Far from Carlene O'Connor. Give me a page number between 1 and 350.
How about 58?
Okay, on page 58, I'm going to quickly scan it. It's the beginning of a chapter.
Ooh,
Um, okay. We're talking about the bog here.
okay.
The bog was the enemy, and it was rumored that some portions were still deep enough to swallow you whole and spit out your bones.
But nobody really knew what was in the bog. It was just a bunch of old stories told at midnight, sometimes over a campfire. Nobody knows if Johnny Jones really disappeared there.
But Henry was about to find out. He wasn't living a story tell. He wasn't living a ghost story around the campfire. His Timberland boots sunk 2 inches deep in the mud of the bog, and he had only taken one step.
He couldn't help but feel in the back of, or remember in the back of his mind, the story they used to tell about his grandmother. They said his grandmother buried his grandfather out here in the bog. He wondered if he would come across his skeleton.
The gun in his right hand felt useless. He had only purchased it 6 months ago for home security, and he had only fired it at practice once. Why did he even bring it out here? What was he even going to shoot at?
He he strongly suspected that bullets would be of no use against a bog monster, the monster that all the kids talked about, the monster that he had heard about in high school, made of peat and disgusting water. What did he plan to do? What was he going to do if the bog monster should rise up out of the bog?
There was only one direction, and that was forward. 4 steps in, he felt the suction of the mud growing stronger, like tentacles around his feet, pulling him down. But he knew that wasn't true. He could still easily lift his shoe, but he wondered how much further in would that not be the case.
Besides, he strongly suspected that it was no mythical bog monster that had gotten his friend Jimmy Jones, and he had made a vow that he was going to find him. But then suddenly, in the darkening twilight, he heard a noise that sounded like the peat separating, like something rising up out of that boggy water.
Oh, I think we call it there. That was great. That was like part X-Files, part Scooby-Doo. The bog monster's going to rip off the mask, and I would have gotten away with it except for you meddling kids.
Right. So you do this all the time. That's very fun.
Every episode. This is like my 210th time doing it.
Wow.
But it's fun. It's fun because I don't know, we had a good little mind meld going on there. I'm like, we are seeing this pretty similarly, I think.
Right. I was just waiting for you to really deke one way or the other and completely throw me off. But no, you were very kind and gentle.
Well, Alma, what a pleasure talking to you, and congratulations on the release of Fiend. And I'm so excited to, fingers crossed about what might happen in production, but we shan't discuss it more for fear of jinxing something.
Right. Thank you so much for having me on. This was so much fun.
Oh, awesome. Hope to meet you in person soon. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that is it. That is my great talk with Alma Katsu. And that's one of the longer storytellings we've done. It could have gone on much longer. I think we had a little bit of a mind meld going on there. Her most recent release is Fiend. That came out in September 2025. So make sure to go check that out. And you can learn all about her at almakatsubooks.com, and you can head on over to carterwilson.com to learn about me, my books, my podcast, my newsletter, all that good stuff, and head on over to unboundwriter.com if you're interested in any of my writing coaching. So that is it. Thanks as always, friends, for watching and or listening to this episode of Making It Up. Another one out just next week. In the meantime, take care.